The night my parents threw me out into the snow on Christmas Eve, they told me I would come crawling back. I didn't. And what they didn't know, what they made sure I would never find out, was that by the next morning, I would be worth more than everyone in that house combined. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the exact moment my life split in two. I was standing barefoot on the front porch, the wood so cold it felt like it was burning through the soles of my feet. Snow had already started piling up around my toes, soft and quiet, like the world was trying to pretend nothing was wrong. Behind me, the Christmas lights blinked in neat, cheerful patterns, red, green, gold, like a postcard version of a family that never really existed. My mother's voice was still ringing in my ears. "You can't do anything on your own, Emily. Not one damn thing." She didn't yell it. That would have been easier to ignore. She said it calmly, like a fact she'd accepted years ago. Then she shoved a black trash bag into my arms. It was light. Too light. And before I could even ask what was inside, my father stepped forward, opened the door just wide enough to push me out, and slammed it so hard the wreath rattled against the wood. The lock clicked. That sound, I still hear it sometimes. Not loud, just final. I stood there for a second, maybe two, waiting for someone to open the door again, waiting for my younger brother, Daniel, to say something, anything. He had been right there in the hallway, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching everything like it was a show he didn't want to interrupt. He didn't move. No one did. Inside, I could hear laughter, plates clinking, my mother calling out something about the roast in the oven. Life went on in there like I had never existed. Across the street, Mrs. Hargrove's curtain shifted just a fraction. I caught the glint of her glasses before she let it fall back into place. Everyone saw. No one stepped in. The wind cut straight through my sweater, thin cotton that might as well have been tissue paper. My fingers were already starting to go numb as I tightened my grip on the trash bag and stepped down off the porch. That's when it tore, right down the side, and whatever was inside spilled halfway out into the snow. Not my clothes, not my documents, not a single thing that belonged to me. A bleach-stained towel, a broken Christmas ornament, a half-burned candle. I just stared at it for a moment, my breath coming out in short white bursts. They hadn't just thrown me out. They had made sure I left with nothing. I remember thinking, very clearly, very calmly, this was planned. I wasn't shaking yet. I wasn't crying. That came later. In that moment, I just felt empty, like something inside me had gone completely still. My car was parked at the curb, a thin layer of snow already covering the windshield. I walked toward it slowly, my sandals slipping against the icy pavement, one hand still clutching what was left of that useless trash bag. I didn't look back at the house. I couldn't, because I knew if I did, if I saw those warm lights again, if I caught even a glimpse of what I had just lost, I might actually break. And I had this strange, quiet feeling in my chest. Not hope, not yet. Just the faintest sense that something about this night wasn't ending the way they thought it would. I sat in my car with the engine running, but the heat barely worked, and the air blowing through the vents felt just as cold as everything else. For a while, I didn't move. I just stared at the house I grew up in, watching the warm glow through the windows blur behind a thin layer of frost forming on the glass. My hands were shaking so badly the keys rattled in the ignition, a small metallic sound that somehow felt louder than the silence pressing in around me. I checked my phone. No service. Of course. I opened my banking app anyway, hoping, stupidly, that maybe I had misremembered something. $182. That was everything I had. I let out a breath that fogged the windshield, then leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. For a second, just 1 second, I thought about going back, knocking on the door, apologizing for something I didn't even believe I had done wrong. I could already hear my mother's voice if I did. Cold, satisfied. See? I told you. That thought alone was enough to stop me. My stomach twisted, reminding me I hadn't eaten since the day before. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was almost midnight. Christmas Eve. Every hotel I could think of would either be full or priced like a luxury resort, and even if I found something cheap, I couldn't afford more than a night, maybe 2 if I didn't eat. I scrolled through my contacts. There weren't many, at least not anymore. Names I used to call. People I used to laugh with. Slowly replaced over the years with distance, excuses, and my mother's quiet, persistent comments about how they weren't good influences, how they didn't really care about me, how I needed to focus on family. I tried calling one number anyway, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I just sat there, the phone still in my hand, realizing something that hit harder than the cold ever could. I had been alone long before tonight. Tonight just made it official. I swallowed, forcing myself upright, and started the car into gear. I couldn't sit there forever. If I stayed, I might change my mind. And I refused to give them that. The roads were nearly empty, just thin tracks of tires cutting through fresh snow. Streetlights flickered overhead as I drove with no real destination in mind, just following the faint memory of places that stayed open late. That's how I found the diner. A small neon sign buzzing weakly in the dark, casting a dull red glow across the parking lot. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and it didn't ask questions. I pulled in, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, my fingers still wrapped tightly around the steering wheel. Then I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the cold. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything started to change. The bell above the diner door chimed softly as I stepped inside, and the warmth hit me so suddenly it made my eyes sting. It smelled like coffee, grease, and something sweet, maybe pancakes or pie. Ordinary, comforting. The kind of place where people sat too long and nobody minded. For a second, I just stood there, letting the heat seep into my frozen fingers, trying not to look like someone who had nowhere else to go. A waitress in her late 50s glanced up from behind the counter. Gray hair pulled back, tired eyes, the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She didn't smile, not right away, but she gave a small nod toward an empty booth by the window. "Sit wherever you like, honey." Her voice was gentle, but careful. I slid into the booth, the vinyl seat cold at first, then slowly warming beneath me. My hands hovered over the menu, but I didn't really read it. I already knew what I could afford. When she came over, she didn't ask if I needed time. "What can I get you?" "Just coffee," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She studied me for half a second longer than necessary, then nodded. Coming right up. No judgment, no pity, just understanding. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared out the window while I waited. Snow drifted past the glass in slow, steady flakes, softening everything outside. People drove by without looking in. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. When she set the coffee down in front of me, the steam curled upward like something alive. I wrapped both hands around the mug immediately, the heat almost painful at first, then grounding. "Warm up," she said quietly before walking away. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I took a small sip. It was bitter, too strong, but it didn't matter. It was warm. It was something. And then, as I adjusted my coat, something slipped from my pocket and hit the table with a soft, solid clink. I froze. Slowly, I looked down. The black card. For a second, I just stared at it, my mind refusing to connect what I was seeing with what I remembered. It looked exactly the same as it had when I was a kid. Smooth, matte black, heavier than any normal card, with no name on it. Just a series of numbers etched in faint gold. My grandfather's card, I hadn't thought about it in years. Not since the day he gave it to me. I was 6, sitting in his lap in the backyard while my parents argued inside the house, their voices sharp even through the glass. He had pressed the card into my small hands and leaned close, his voice low and serious in a way that didn't match the warmth in his eyes. One day, he told me, you might have nowhere left to go. When that happens, use this. I remember laughing back then, telling him I'd never need it, that my parents would always take care of me. I swallowed hard now, my fingers brushing the edge of the card. The waitress passed by again and her eyes flicked down to the table. She stopped, just for a second. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get that?" I looked up at her, confused. My grandfather gave it to me. Something shifted in her expression. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. She straightened quickly, glancing toward the kitchen as if making sure no one else was listening. "You might want to hold on to that real tight," she said softly. "People don't just have those." Before I could ask what she meant, she walked away, leaving me sitting there with the card in my hand and a question I suddenly couldn't ignore. I didn't sleep that night, not really. Just drifted in and out in the back seat of my car with the black card pressed against my chest like it was the only solid thing I had left. The cold never fully left. It crept in through the windows, through the doors, through every thin layer of clothing I had. My fingers went numb first, then my toes, and every time I woke up, I had to remind myself where I was and why. By the time morning came, the sky was a dull gray, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it already was. I sat up slowly, my back stiff, my neck aching, my breath fogging the air in front of me. For a second, I forgot. Then it all rushed back, the door slamming, the lock clicking, my mother's voice. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the card. It felt heavier than it had the night before. I turned it over in my fingers, tracing the numbers with my thumb. No bank name I recognized, no logo I could place. Just that same cold, matte surface and the faint gold engraving. And the memory of my grandfather's voice. "Use it when you have nowhere left to go." "Well," I whispered into the empty car, my voice hoarse from the cold. "I guess this is it." My phone was dead. Completely. The screen stayed black no matter how many times I pressed the button. I didn't even know the exact address of the bank, just the name I had searched the night before the battery gave out. Cumberland National Trust. I repeated it under my breath like it might disappear if I didn't hold on to it. The engine protested when I started the car, a low groan that matched exactly how I felt. I turned the heater on full, even though I knew it wouldn't do much, and pulled out of the parking lot. The roads were clearer now, but still slick in places. The snow pushed into uneven piles along the sides. Morning traffic had started to pick up, people heading to work, to normal lives, to places where they belonged. I felt like I was moving through a world that no longer included me. It took me longer than it should have to find the bank. When I finally did, I almost drove past it. The building didn't look like any bank I had ever been in. It wasn't modern or bright or inviting. It stood tall and quiet with marble columns and heavy brass doors, like something pulled out of another time. The kind of place that didn't advertise. Didn't need to. I parked across the street and just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel. This was a mistake. That thought came fast and sharp. What if the card didn't work? What if the account was empty? What if I walked in there and they looked at me the same way my parents had, like I didn't belong anywhere near something like that? I could already hear my mother again. "You can't do anything on your own." My grip tightened. "No," I said out loud, the word firmer this time. If I didn't walk into that building right now, she would be right, and I refused to give her that. I opened the car door, stepped out into the cold, and crossed the street. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I didn't stop, not even when I reached the door. Not even when my reflection in the brass handle showed me exactly what I looked like. Tired, pale, wearing yesterday's clothes. Someone who didn't belong. I pulled the door open anyway. The air inside the bank was warm and still, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and something expensive I couldn't name. Everything was quiet. Not silent, but controlled. The kind of quiet that made you instinctively lower your voice without being told. My shoes felt too loud against the marble floor as I stepped forward, every movement echoing just enough to make me aware of how out of place I looked. There were only a few people inside. An older couple sitting at a desk with a banker, papers spread neatly between them. A man in a tailored coat speaking in hushed tones near the far wall. No one looked rushed. No one looked worried. This wasn't a place for people like me. A woman behind the front desk glanced up as I approached. She looked to be in her early 50s, neat hair, composed expression, the kind of polite smile that was practiced but not unkind. "Good morning," she said. "How can we help you today?" My throat tightened for a second, but I forced the words out. I need to check the balance on an account." "Of course," she replied smoothly. "Do you have your card?" I nodded and slid the black card across the counter. The moment it touched the surface, something changed. Her smile didn't disappear, but it shifted, subtly, like she had just recognized something she hadn't expected to see. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hand, her eyes scanning the numbers. For a brief second, her composure cracked, not dramatically, just a flicker. Surprise. Maybe even a hint of tension. Then she set it down gently. "One moment, please." She didn't call another teller. She didn't reach for a machine. She picked up the phone. "Mr. Brooks," she said quietly, her tone suddenly more formal. "I have someone here with a legacy card." Legacy. The word landed heavier than it should have. She hung up and looked back at me, her expression now composed again, but different, more attentive, more careful. "Someone will be with you shortly," she said. "Please have a seat. A manager, for a balance check." My stomach tightened as I moved toward one of the leather chairs near the window. I sat down slowly, my hands folding together in my lap to hide how much they were shaking. This was it. Either the card meant something, or it meant nothing at all. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Each second stretched longer than the last. My mind raced through every possible outcome. Maybe the account was closed. Maybe it had been emptied years ago. Maybe this was all just a mistake I had built up into something bigger, because I needed it to be. Just as I started to convince myself to stand up and leave before I embarrassed myself any further, a man stepped into the lobby. He was tall, maybe early 40s, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made specifically for him. Clean lines, precise movements, the kind of presence that didn't need to demand attention to get it. His eyes scanned the room once, then settled on me. "Miss Carter?" I stood quickly, my legs almost betraying me. "Yes." He gave a small nod. "I'm Ethan Brooks, branch manager. Would you come with me, please?" "Privately." That word echoed in my head even though he hadn't said it yet, but I could feel it. This wasn't going to be a simple balance check, not even close. His office smelled like cedar and something clean, like new paper and quiet money, and the moment the door closed behind me, the rest of the world seemed to disappear. "Please have a seat," Ethan said, gesturing toward a leather chair across from his desk. I sat down carefully, my hands gripping my knees under the table so he wouldn't see them shaking. Up close, he looked even more composed, the kind of man who had spent years learning how not to react to anything. "Before we proceed," he said, settling into his chair, "I'll need to verify your identity." I nodded and handed him my driver's license. He studied it, then turned slightly toward his computer, typing something in. The soft clicking of the keys sounded impossibly loud in the quiet room. Seconds passed, then his eyebrows lifted. Just a fraction. But I saw it. He looked back at the card on his desk, then at me again, his gaze sharper now, more focused. "Miss Carter," he said slowly, "the card you presented is associated with what we classify as a legacy account." The word again. Legacy. "It hasn't been accessed in many years," he continued, "but it remains fully active." Active. My pulse jumped. He turned the monitor slightly, not enough for me to see clearly, but enough for the light from the screen to reflect in his glasses. I caught a glimpse of lines, documents, more than a simple account summary. "This account," he added, his voice even, "is protected under very specific instructions." I swallowed. Protected from what? His eyes met mine. "From anyone but you." The words hit harder than I expected. My grandfather's face flashed in my mind, the way he used to look at me, steady, certain, like he knew something I didn't. Ethan clicked something else on the screen, then leaned back slightly. "There is a directive attached," he said, "established approximately 23 years ago by Henry Carter." My breath caught. He specified that the account could only be accessed by his granddaughter, Emily Carter, upon presentation of the physical card. I felt the room tilt just a little. This is real?" I whispered. Ethan didn't answer right away. He studied me for a moment, not unkindly, but carefully, as if weighing something. "May I ask," he said, his tone softening just slightly, "why you chose to access it today?" The question hung in the air between us. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling again. "My parents kicked me out last night," I said quietly. "Christmas Eve. I don't have anywhere to go." I expected embarrassment to follow, shame. Instead, there was silence. Then a small shift in his posture. "I see," he said. Just 2 words. But they didn't sound dismissive. They didn't sound skeptical. They sounded understood. I forced myself to look back up at him. I don't even know if there's anything in the account. I just remembered what he said and... My voice trailed off. Ethan nodded once, then turned the monitor fully toward me. "Miss Carter," he said calmly, "I think it's time you did." I hesitated. For a second, I couldn't bring myself to look, because whatever was on that screen was about to change everything. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The numbers didn't make sense at first. My eyes moved across the screen, trying to organize them into something familiar, something small enough to understand. But they didn't shrink. They didn't simplify. They just stayed there. $63.8 million. I blinked, then again. "No," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop it. That can't be right." Ethan didn't flinch. "It is." My hands gripped the edge of the chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. I leaned forward, staring at the screen like if I looked hard enough, it would rearrange itself into something reasonable. It didn't. That number didn't belong to someone who slept in her car. It didn't belong to someone with $182 left in her account. It didn't belong to me. "There has to be a mistake," I said, my voice breaking now. "My parents, they said he had nothing. They said he was barely getting by." Ethan's gaze didn't soften, but something in it shifted. Not pity, something steadier. "Your parents," he said carefully, "were never given access to this account." The words landed slowly, like something unlocking inside my head. He turned back to the screen and clicked through another set of files. More numbers, more documents. My eyes struggled to keep up. "This," he continued, "is only the liquid portion." I looked at him. "Only?" He nodded once and opened another tab. Properties appeared. Addresses, deeds, rows of ownership records tied to my grandfather's name. Another click. Investments, stocks, partnerships, names I recognized from news headlines, companies I had seen on television. My stomach dropped. "This isn't possible," I said, shaking my head. "He lived in the same house for years. He wore the same clothes. He used coupons." Ethan allowed himself the faintest hint of a smile. Some of the wealthiest individuals prefer to appear otherwise. I leaned back in the chair, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack something open inside my chest. My grandfather. The man they told me was confused, forgetful, out of touch. The man they said didn't care enough to help me. My throat tightened. "He knew," I whispered. Ethan reached into a drawer beside him and pulled out a sealed red folder, placing it carefully on the desk between us. "He knew a great deal," he said. My eyes dropped to the folder. My name was written across the front in familiar handwriting, for Emily. "When you are finally free." Something inside me broke. Not the way it had the night before. Not empty. This was sharper, deeper. Because suddenly, everything my parents had ever told me started to unravel. And for the first time, I realized they hadn't just pushed me out of that house. They had been hiding something from me my entire life. And whatever was inside that folder was going to prove it. My hands trembled as I reached for the red folder, the paper beneath my fingers thick, expensive, deliberate, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. I didn't open it right away. For a second, I just stared at my name written across the front in my grandfather's handwriting. The same looping letters I remembered from birthday cards and short notes he used to slip into my books when I was a kid. For Emily, when you are finally free. Free. The word hit me harder than the number on the screen. Ethan didn't rush me. He leaned back slightly, giving me space, but I could feel his attention, steady and quiet, like he understood that whatever was inside that folder wasn't just financial. It was personal. I opened it slowly. The first thing inside was a letter, folded carefully, worn slightly at the edges, like it had been handled more than once before it was sealed away. My throat tightened as I unfolded it. My Emily. I stopped breathing for a second. If you are reading this, it means they have finally done what I feared they would. My eyes blurred, but I forced myself to keep reading. They value control above all else, and when they realize they cannot control you, they will discard you, not because you are weak, but because you are the one thing they cannot bend. A tear slipped down my cheek before I even realized it was there. I needed you to know this truth, even if it comes to you too late. You were never a burden. You were never difficult. You were never the problem. My chest ached, sharp and unfamiliar, like something that had been locked away for years was finally being forced open. Everything I built for this moment, for the day you would need a way out that they could not touch. I pressed my lips together, trying to steady my breathing. "I'm sorry I could not protect you from them while I was alive, but I have done everything in my power to protect you after I am gone." My fingers tightened around the page. "You are my legacy, Emily. Not the money, not the properties. You." I closed my eyes for a second, the weight of those words settling deep inside me. For years, I believed the opposite. For years, I believed I was the disappointment. I swallowed hard and looked down at the rest of the contents in the folder. Documents, dozens of them, medical evaluations confirming my grandfather had been mentally competent, legal notes, records, dates, signatures, carefully organized, carefully preserved, proof. I turned a page, and everything inside me went cold. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me, all in his handwriting, all never opened. My breath hitched. I never got these, I whispered. Ethan's voice was quiet. "No, you didn't." I picked one up with shaking hands and unfolded it. "My sweet girl, I wrote to you last week, but I have not heard back. I hope you are well. I miss you more than I can say." Another tear fell. Then another. "They told me you were too busy to visit." I do not believe that is true. My vision blurred completely now. "They are keeping us apart, Emily. I do not know why, but I'm trying to fix it." I pressed the letter against my chest, my entire body shaking. All those years, all those missed visits, all those moments I thought he had forgotten me. It wasn't him. It was them. And in that moment, sitting in that quiet office, surrounded by everything they had hidden, I realized something that changed everything. My parents hadn't just lied to me. They had stolen my entire life. I couldn't stop shaking, but the tears had dried into something sharper, something that didn't feel like breaking anymore. It felt like waking up. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and forced myself to keep going, turning page after page, even though each one cut deeper than the last. Dates, notes, legal filings. My grandfather hadn't just suspected what they were doing, he had documented everything, carefully, methodically. Like he knew one day I would need proof. They attempted to gain control of my financial authority. One report read, signed, and notarized. I refused. Another document, a medical evaluation. Patient shows no signs of cognitive decline. Fully competent to manage assets. My chest tightened. All those years my parents told me he was confused, that he didn't remember things, that visiting him would only upset him. Lies. Every single one of them. I flipped to another section, my fingers moving faster now, anger replacing the numbness. Email transcripts. My mother's name at the top, my father's beneath it. If he won't sign, we need another way. We can't let that money sit there. We deserve access. After everything we've done. If Emily keeps seeing him, he might leave her something. The room felt too small. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, pounding in my ears. They knew. They had known all along. I swallowed hard and kept reading. A formal incident report. They attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent. I refused to comply with their request. My hands tightened into fists. They didn't just isolate him. They tried to take everything from him. And when that failed, they came for me. A final note was clipped to the back of the file, written in my grandfather's handwriting, the ink slightly faded but still clear. If anything happens to me, investigate Robert and Linda Carter. They will not stop. I stared at the words. They will not stop. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold from the night before, because suddenly everything made sense. The way my mother had slowly pushed people out of my life, the way my father had controlled every financial decision, the way they reacted the moment I refused to sign that loan. This wasn't just about money. It never had been. It was about control. And the second I stepped outside of it, they removed me. I closed the folder slowly, my breathing uneven, my mind racing faster than I could keep up with. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. Ethan folded his hands on the desk, watching me carefully. "That," he said, "depends on what you want." I let out a slow breath. For the first time in my life, I didn't know the answer to that, but I did know one thing. I wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to them. Not to the version of myself they had spent years trying to keep small. I looked down at the folder again, at my grandfather's handwriting, at the truth he had protected for me, and something inside me settled. Not calm, not yet, but certain. Whatever came next, I wasn't going to be the girl they threw out into the snow anymore. I walked out of the bank with the red folder pressed tightly against my chest, like if I loosened my grip even a little, everything inside it might disappear, and I would wake up back in my car, cold and alone, with nothing but that empty night behind me. The snow had started again, soft and steady, melting the moment it touched my skin. I barely felt it. My mind was too loud, too full, replaying everything I had just seen, everything I had just learned over and over again. $63.8 million, properties, investments, proof, truth. And the one thing that hit harder than all of it was that my grandfather had never abandoned me. They had taken him from me. I reached my car and sat down slowly, closing the door behind me as if sealing myself off from the world. For a moment, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my breath uneven, my heart still trying to catch up with everything that had changed in the span of a single morning. I wasn't who I was yesterday. That girl had died somewhere between the porch and this parking lot. My phone buzzed. The sound made me flinch. I stared at the screen for a second before picking it up. Unknown number. I knew who it was before I even opened the message. "We need to talk. Call us now." My mother. No apology, no concern, no question about whether I was safe, just control. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, the old instinct kicking in, the one that told me to respond, to explain, to fix things before they got worse. Then I thought about the letters. All those years, all those lies. I blocked the number, just like that. The silence that followed felt different from the night before. Not empty, clear. I started the engine. The heater kicked in weakly, but this time I barely noticed. The cold didn't feel the same anymore. It didn't feel like something that was closing in on me. It felt like something I was moving through. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove without a clear destination, the road unfolding ahead of me like something new, something uncertain, something that finally belonged to me. At the first red light, I stopped and looked down at the red folder again. My life, my grandfather's truth, my parents' lies, all of it sitting right there in my lap. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. Because people like my parents, they didn't let go of control quietly. And now, for the first time in my life, I had something they couldn't reach, something they couldn't take. That thought settled into me, steady and grounding. I wasn't powerless anymore. I drove for another 20 minutes before pulling into a small cafe, the kind of place I might have walked past before without noticing. Warm lights glowed through the windows, and for the first time since the night before, I chose to stop somewhere, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I wanted to. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee. People sat at small tables, talking quietly, living ordinary lives that suddenly didn't feel so far out of reach. I ordered food, real food, eggs, toast, coffee. Not because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, but because I could. That realization alone almost made me laugh. I sat by the window, the red folder beside me, and for the first time, I let myself breathe without bracing for what might come next. Halfway through my coffee, my phone buzzed again. Different number, different message. "You think you can ignore us? After everything we've done for you?" I stared at it. The words sharp and familiar. The old version of me would have felt guilt, would have felt small. This version of me didn't. I took a screenshot and saved it. Then I blocked the number. I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. And something about that felt like the first real step forward. Not the money, not the account, not even the truth. That moment. I finished my meal slowly, grounding myself in the small details, the warmth of the cup in my hands, the soft hum of conversation around me, the steady rhythm of a world that no longer felt like it was pushing me out. When I stood up to leave, I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the folder, tucked it securely under my arm, and walked out into the snow again. But this time, it didn't feel like exile. It felt like a beginning. There was still a long road ahead. Legal battles, confrontations, decisions I wasn't ready to make yet. But for the first time in my life, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going back. Not to their house, not to their control, not to the version of myself they had spent years trying to convince me I was. I got into my car, closed the door, and allowed myself one final look at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I still looked tired. Still looked like someone who had been through something she didn't deserve. But there was something else there now, something they had never been able to break. I started the engine, my grip steady, my breath calm, and pulled back onto the road without looking back, because the girl who stood barefoot in the snow that night thought she had lost everything. She didn't realize she had just been set free. If this story made you feel something, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment 3 words: I choose me.